All right. Well, welcome to the Google Ads versus local service ads, choosing the right mix for your business. This is kind of a complicated subject, so if you have questions, feel free to ask them and trying to keep this as interactive as possible. Let's go ahead and move to the presentation. So, my background, I've got over 25 years helping companies grow. I've been focused on landscaping since 2009. I'm active in the industry. As far as technology goes, I've got 14 patents issued and 22 pending. On Moz.com, I'm recognized as a leader, ranked at 109 in the Moz SEO community of 536,000 people. And essentially, we've got a very, very low turnover rate as a company, and we do that by delivering a variety of services. We're a full service agency. And essentially, what we focus on in our agency and also with our clients and these seminars is increasing your visibility, getting more people to convert, and then measuring, if you don't quantify or attribute, you can improve. So, what we're hoping to do today is get you a clear understanding between local service ads and Google Ads, and then give you the tools to choose whether to do local service ads, Google Ads, or both. Both is becoming an increasingly popular option because of how search is changing. We're going to talk about measurement or metrics so that you know if you're doing okay. And then, really, just for your company, determining what types of ads are best for you. So, local service ads is the most popular and it's also the easiest to set up. This is kind of a picture of a standard search page, and the local service ads are these ads at the top in the green. And just at a really high level, the difference between local service ads and Google ads is the control and the ease of use. And so local service ads are highly automated, and essentially you advertise by a service category. It's not a specific ad or ad group like Google Ads. You also pay for leads, not clicks. So the benefit of that is that you're only paying for the people that actually contact you, not the people that might look at the ad but not follow through. And people, and again, one of the things I like about local service ads is it comes from people actively searching in your area. So local service ads are based on your Google ad, or sorry, on your Google business profile. And so it's going to be leads that are in your direct service area and it's driven off your Google business profile. That's, the main, so the two main differentiators is local service ads are automated, highly automated. You have less control because of that, but they're also driven off your Google business profile, which is a benefit in many cases. The leads show up as calls and messages. In our case, most of our clients turn off the text messaging because they can't get back fast enough. Most people prefer just getting calls, and you're paying for inquiries related to your services. And super important if you decide to do local service ads, you have the ability to rate each lead. And the reason why you want to do that is if you get a bad lead, you want to let Google know. If you get a good lead, you want to let Google know. And the reason why is the way their AI works is it's kind of a training algorithm. And if you give it feedback on what's good and bad, you tend to get more of the leads that you rate as good and less of the bad ones. The other thing that this is kind of an inside tip is Google uses that feedback loop to kind of figure out how busy you are. And so, one thing to be conscious of is you want to constantly be giving it feedback, because if you don't give it feedback, Google will assume that you're really busy with, delivering services and you don't need more leads. So, you want to do the rating, for two reasons. One, to improve your quality per lead. Two, to get more leads. And Google local service ads are a little bit different. One, and this is true on all ads, you want to respond in less than 5 minutes. So if you have a slow response time, that actually is something that is rated here. Reviews, just like your Google business profile, reviews are weighted in the quality score for Google local service ads. And so the more reviews you have versus a competitor, that'll make your bid not have to be as high as far as the cost and make it more likely that you get the lead. And then the third part, and this is the part that people don't pay enough attention to, is they're going to match your categories. And we're going to go into that more in a minute. So Google ads and local service ads are ranked via an auction. So you're bidding against others. And what's different on them is it's not just cost, they consider your overall profile quality. So, like how much you update your Google business profile, if you're doing weekly Google posts, if you're doing reviews, the more active you are there, the better you do in their bidding. And so, it's not something where you can just throw more money at it and get more leads. You have to be active to get the most benefit from local service ads. And then in local service ads, you set a weekly budget, target spend. That normally starts out at 150 and, can go as high as like 750 to 1,000 per week. And then as far as your budget, it doesn't mean you're going to spend that, because there's got to be leads. And again, the fourth factor is to set your monthly max so you don't go over your budget. And basically, with the bidding, you're essentially setting up the maximum you're willing to pay for a lead. And then there's two options in the bidding, automated or manual. You pay per valid lead, not per click. And we recommend automated bidding. The problem with setting a budget is if there are others competing for the same lead, if you set the budget, the cost per lead too low, you miss out on a lot of the leads. And we've found that using the automated bidding, you get more leads, but also it doesn't really appreciably affect your cost. And so, we don't recommend manually setting it, but you can do that. And so when you do your bidding options, most people set up automated bidding maximum per lead. You can check the box and set a cost target per lead, but that's going to decrease your amount of leads. And then if you do want to set the target per lead, that's in a case where you're financially constrained, you've got a really tight budget, and it will just automatically try to keep your average around $20 per lead. So it will do that, but you also limit your options. So, and again, 20 is an example. You can set it at any price that you want. And then option two is max lead, and that's just setting a max of what you'll pay for a single lead. But this again limits your flexibility in the auction. And essentially, Google Systems has its own way of ranking things. And essentially, the thing to really look at is trust and quality. So, like the Google Verified badge, high rankings on the reviews, lots of positive reviews. They do look at how fast you pick up the phone or reply to messages. And so, the faster you reply, the higher you go in the bidding. And then they do look at geographic relevance, how close you are to the person searching. And then they look at your business hours. So if you're actually open, you're going to be more likely to get a lead, which kind of makes sense. We recommend that you start with automated bidding. You give the system about 2 weeks to learn, and essentially you want to use enough budget for roughly 10 leads per week if possible. We usually start at like 150 to 200. And then during that period, you kind of tighten your service areas, job types, and reviews, things like that. Okay. And then the other option on local service ads is target cost per lead. That is more control. And again, it's kind of like a deal that you use that when cost control matters more than pure lead volume. And again, you can do it, but it does lower the amount of leads you get. And then going back to the feedback loop, it's really important that you rate the lead quality in Google Ads after a lead comes in. You basically get that evaluated by Google. And by the way, if it's a terrible lead, they'll often just reverse the charge on the lead. It doesn't show up on the current month's bill, it shows up on the next month's, but they will often give you a credit. And essentially, the faster you're giving those ratings, again, that's a ranking or bidding factor, and you will get more leads if you rate leads more often. Like we actually recommend that you do it daily if you can. And you want to, when you set it up, choose your service categories. The temptation, because there's so many options on the service categories, is just to select everything. The issue with that is you often then start getting leads that you really don't want to pay for. We actually recommend you prune your categories and think about it in terms of you're going to have to pay like 80 to 110. The clicks themselves are not going to cost that necessarily, but you end up worst case, you're paying 80 to 110 per lead. And so the service that you're advertising has to be worth paying that much per lead. So like, for example, a landscape redesign or retaining wall, it's definitely worth paying that, but it may not be worth paying that for like a lawn mowing. You want to set a realistic service area that your crews can actually get to. You want to match the business hours to when someone's going to be there to answer the calls, preferably in 5 minutes or less. You need to look at the missed calls or the slow responses as lost revenue and not a marketing or lead issue. So on Google Ads, I like these, and a lot of people like these because they give you a lot more control. So where local service ads are completely automated, Google Ads let you kind of control what leads you get, where you get them from, and what service categories. Whereas local service ads, they're going to just advertise whatever services you say you're available for, and your budget applies to all those services, and you have no control over what leads you have. To me, the key difference between local service ads and Google Ads is your control. And we're going to go into that in a little more detail here. The downside, by the way, to Google Ads is with that extra control, you actually need to do more setup and management. So to give you an idea, like local service ads, other than rating the leads, you don't really need to do anything to manage local service ads other than going in once or twice a month to check things, or if there's issues that come up with Google. Google Ads, to really do a good job, you have to be fairly knowledgeable, but you also have to go in daily and adjust the bidding. So Google Ads is much more labor intensive, but you also get a lot of gains. So you only advertise the services you want to sell. You are able to, and again, you can't do this in local service ads, but when somebody clicks an ad, you can have it go to a specific landing page on your website for that service. That increases your conversion or likelihood that somebody's going to fill out a contact form or call you by about 70%. And essentially, it only becomes a lead if they call or fill out a form or take another tracked actions. And essentially results depend on both the ad and what happens after somebody clicks on the ad. And so there's a lot more opportunity for conversion rate optimization, which is where you can optimize your landing page and your ad group to get a better conversion rate and a lower cost per lead. So what people like is you can, promote specific services. You can get more control over the traffic of leads because of that. And you get, again, it Google Ads tends to be higher ticket or priority work. So as companies grow, they tend to move to Google Ads, and it has a lot more metrics where you can more accurately measure the performance. There's also tools like What Converts, which is a tool we use. It helps you track the customer journey and also has tracking numbers so you can even track the calls and where the calls are coming from. And then in the mix, just to make it extra complicated, there's now AI Max, which is AI for Google Ads, and it does some pretty crazy stuff. It's able to adapt the copy based on who's searching and the intent on the landing page. It works really well the longer the campaign goes. And then the other thing is now they've got these AI summaries, and the AI Max ads are what show up in the summaries. And essentially, optimizing Google Ads, you're going to want to build campaigns around specific service categories. I would also say, for example, in the Seattle area, you've got different markets based on location. And so one of the things I like is you can actually you've got your service categories and that's called your campaign. And then you've got your ad groups, and your ad groups, you can have different ad groups that go to different areas. And so, and I'm just kind of making a silly example, but you could have an ad group that just goes to people in downtown Seattle, and you could have another ad group for people that are in Mercer Island area. And so being able to set those ad groups and service categories gives you a lot of control. The other thing is you can set priorities among the campaigns and ad groups, and you can set budgets by campaign. So again, local service ads, you set an overall budget for the month, and that's it, and that's a weekly budget. Google Ads, you set a monthly budget, and then you have further granularity in that you can set a budget by campaign, and then within that campaign, you can set priorities. And then I'm going to jump ahead here, but you can then use zip codes to control where the ads run. So you can, again, set zip codes that ads run in or don't run in. You can also exclude. You can say, hey, I don't want this ad to run in these zip codes. So you have a lot of control about where it goes. And then you have keywords, which I think everybody's familiar with, which is the keywords for the service. But the other thing that's probably more important and what has to be built out at the beginning of an ad campaign is your negative keywords. And so to, give you an example, we've got an ad campaign running for a landscaper, and he's got 1,500 negative keywords for landscaping companies that have landscaping in their name. So like in the United States, it's crazy, but there's 650,000 landscaping companies, and many of them include landscaping. You have to exclude every one of those in your area. There's also the campaign learns over time keywords that don't have good what's called search intent, where people are actually intending to get your product or service. And so you have negative keywords for that. And one of the benefits of dealing with somebody like us is we've built up this list of negative keywords from other campaigns that we start out with. That's kind of the one of the value adds we have. If you're building it yourself, though, everybody focuses on keywords. I would say as or probably more important than the keywords is the negative keywords to refine the targeting. And then we've talked about, target and exclusion zip codes so we can control where things add. And then the new thing, a few years ago, we had all these privacy laws come in place. And, before that, we could really do some interesting customer match data. Now, with even as little as like 100 customers, you can now upload customer match data and essentially set your campaigns to look for clients like that. So essentially, you can create a list of ideal clients and upload those, and then people doing the search that are kind of in that preferred customer type are specifically targeted. And so, essentially, the key defining difference between Google Ads and local service ads is the control and the ability to set things up. And so to get, we talk about dialing in Google Ads and what we're doing usually over the first 30 to 60 days is getting kind of clear service targeting, making sure landing pages are set up properly, and then the other just overall in your sales process, attribution is really important. And so you want to make sure that you've got really good conversion tracking and just general attribution. So you want to set up, Google Analytics and Search Console. You want to combine that with your Google Ads campaign, and you want to measure as much as you can of the entire customer journey so that you can consistently work towards improving your conversion and lowering your cost per lead. And then, you know, in our industry, because we've been so fortunate for the last several years, people kind of got lazy about doing follow-up. The climate has changed. And so it's become more and more important to do consistent follow-up after the leads come in. We recommend, 7 to 9 follow-ups with clients just because, people aren't always ready to take the call when you want to call them, or some people prefer to be connected via email or text. So just, get the best value out of your leads by having a good sales process and having good follow-up. And so, again, you've got the local service ads and the Google ads. You know, Local service ads are kind of a great way to start. They're simpler and kind of focused on leads, driven by reviews. Google ads, you got way more control, better targeting, and at the same time, there's more setup and landing pages tracking, things like that you've got to do. So, local service ads, and we do recommend that people start with these. It's good to have some strong reviews. You want to constantly be working on getting more reviews. You need to make sure your team is answering the calls when they come in, preferably in 5 minutes or less. It's, again, local service ads are simpler, so they're a good way to launch. And your services match common local service searches. And again, when you're smaller, you don't have the ability to have as much control because you don't have the resources. So you give up control, but you get simplicity for that. And Google Ads, you get tighter control over what's advertised. You're able to prioritize the services that you advertise. And, but you want to be ready to kind of set up your tracking and campaign structure and be ready to manage landing pages. So we tend to put people on Google Ads after their landing pages and service category pages are built out. And so just to kind of remind you from this page, you've got the local service ads is at the top in the green. A Google ad is right below that, and then below that's the map pack. And then now on some pages, you have the AI summaries, and the Google ads show up in AI summaries, and the local service ads do not. And so a lot of time we used to have people go local service ads or Google ads. A lot of times now people are doing both because it's kind of a way to be found in different places. And we see people kind of prioritizing between local service ads and Google ads. Usually they have a higher budget on Google ads because of the tighter control and service prioritization, and then a smaller budget for local service ads. And then as far as advertising go, I've kind of referred to this. You want to not, compare the channels by lead volume. You want to look at all your leads coming in, and then, basically look at your cost per lead based on that. You don't, you want to look at your book jobs and attribute those to the source. You want to track the close rate with your sales force, and you want to look at your average job value. And so the metrics you want to track each week as a team and as your salesperson is you want to look at your overall spend. You want to look at the leads, what your close rate or is kind of like what your book jobs were, and then your overall cost per book job, and again, that tells you your close rate. And then overall, you want to have your overall job value, and you want to have that number together, preferably on a weekly basis, at a minimum on a monthly basis. And you want to use that as part of your annual plan for revenue. And kind of these are tools that you're going to use to track whether, what you're doing is working or not. Also, what you don't want in the fourth quarter is a surprise that you're totally behind on revenue, because by then it's too late to get caught up. And so you want to look at, you want to have a plan for how many jobs you want every month and kind of the average value per job and the type of jobs. You want to have kind of a projected close rate, and then you want to update your projections, and you're either behind or ahead, but you want to keep updating those throughout the year so you can act accordingly. And if you don't measure these things, it kind of eliminates some of your control to make positive changes. And you want to have a way to capture every lead. So you want to have it set up so that, you've got contact forms, preferably that go into a CRM, a customer relationship management database. You want to have your phone set up so that they're going to someone that's going to pick up the phone. And if that's not available, you want to have at a minimum voicemail. And, you know, you should also consider AI receptionist if, as an alternative to voicemail. On the phone side of things, you can also have automation set up so that when somebody calls you and you miss the call, there's a text that goes back to them. And then once you get the lead, you need to track who's calling them back, and you want to have, some sort of pipeline. Like my pipeline for my company is 10 steps long. It's like the steps I normally go through with a client. And you want to track where your leads are in the pipeline and the value of those leads. You want to have a consistent follow-up process, and by the way, have assigned who's going to do the follow-up. I I still am somewhat incredulous, but I had a client several years ago that they weren't closing any jobs, and as it turns out, everyone thought somebody else was going to pick up the phone, and nobody was assigned to like respond to the leads, and so nobody was responding. And obviously once they resolved that, their close rate and their number of book jobs went way up. But as silly as it sounds, you want to know throughout the whole day, you want to know who's picking up and who's responding, and you want to track those close rates. And then you want to, consistently attribute it or mark the jobs as booked. And anyway, we normally start people out with local service ads. We add Google Ads as people grow, so that gives them more control. And then, as you can handle more volume, most people go to a hybrid between local service ads and Google Ads. So, over the next 7 days, think about this. Maybe choose local service ads or Google Ads or both. Really important for both advertising platform. Really think about the services you want to pay to advertise. Think about the area that you can actually provide services and set that up. Get a basic setup going and then put your lead, like whether you do advertising or not, I can't really stress enough how important it is to have good lead tracking in place. And once that's done, turn on your leads and get going. Anyway, well, I appreciate everyone coming, and we hope that you have a great day.